Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for our topic on how online testing supports impact campus practices. I am Tara Whedon, the Curriculum and Learning Design Manager here at Eduphoria, and I am joined this afternoon by our hosts, Emily Cram and Jeremy Wagner. They are both members of our product management team. We're very excited to share this information with you today. Here is some housekeeping as we get started. So as a reminder, recording is in progress. You will be emailed a link to the recording approximately 24 hours after we have broadcast. That email will include a link to the presentation, and that presentation will include hyperlinks of the online help that will be referenced throughout the presentation. So again, we are recording and you will get that tomorrow. We have a couple ways that you can participate and engage with us this afternoon, and one of those is the Q&A window. So if you have specific questions about the functionality of what we're speaking to this afternoon, please drop those in the Q&A window so myself or one of our wonderful hosts is able to respond to you. The chat, we reserve that for general conversation amongst the audience, as well as for responding to some engagement activities that we will sprinkle throughout the presentation. So again, if you have a question that you really need us to answer, please make sure it's in the Q&A window and that will prompt our attention there. Our objectives this afternoon are to ensure that your students have appropriate access to the available student supports that are relevant for their learning processes, for you to figure out how to analyze use of those supports within the AWARE system, and also to speak a little bit about how we can practice using supports with our students. So we don't put a high level test in front of them and that's the first time they've tried to use one of these tools. So our first opportunity to engage in that chat is coming up now, so get ready.
Okay, we like to start with something a little bit fun and an icebreaker. So you tell us, which superpower would you choose today? The ability to fly? Would you be invisible? Would you have super strength? Or I love D. I mean, you're already an educator and living that life, so you have a superpower. So I expect to see some Ds in there. I see B, A, all of the above. Well played. I like it. Oh, I have one without the other. Need several of them. I like it. Lots of all of the above. Lots of B. You want to be invisible. That's kind of funny.
Great for that active monitoring.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, you know, closer to 3 in the afternoon, like invisibility is awesome. So yeah, totally understandable.
Bonus points if you want to share your teaching superpower. Mine was I could always discern who was speaking, even if I couldn't see who was speaking. So that really shocked my students when I knew from across the room their voice, and they knew I wasn't watching them.
I like it. I was always the person that every kid told their silly stories to. So I have a collection of just crazy, silly stories from kids that makes me laugh so hard. I don't know what it is about me. They wanted to tell me their silly stories. So I like it. That's so all right. Fun. Well, thanks for giving us feedback, being involved in our chat. We like it. Makes it more fun. So we'll dive into the content. All right, available support. So we're going to cover this from a couple of different lenses because there are several different lenses to view this from. So we'll kind of start taking it in, what does every kid have? So what does every kid get as a support when they take a test in AWARE? So I really like to reiterate these. I had an amazing mom experience 2 days ago, and I was showing my daughter, hey, flag a question. Hey, make sure you answer the question completely. Did you eliminate answer choices? And she thought that was the coolest thing ever. So making sure that they understand what they have at their fingertips to help them be more successful, especially in this online testing environment that is pretty new, especially to elementary kids. So making sure they know you have a cool question guide. It'll show you which questions you flagged and maybe which ones you didn't answer completely. Because again, at the bottom of our screen where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have all the question numbers, students will not receive a green check mark unless they have answered all of it. So for text entry, they have to actually click in both boxes and they have to write something or that check mark won't appear. So make sure that they know to use that as a tool to guide them. Again, flagging those questions that you're unsure of, that you want to go back and look at. Do you need a color overlay as a support? Do you need to zoom in or zoom out? Like we said, eliminating those answer choices. I mean, elementary kids, they thrive off of that, but it's great for all grade levels. Are you highlighting words? My daughter is loving highlighting, and then she loves to use the dictionary and to go find those words to make sure she understands them. Are you also communicating on the notepad tool, writing out any of those thoughts since we don't have that paper experience? So are we utilizing those pieces? And like I said, the question completion is going to be huge because the questions look very different now. So bringing all of that in, every student gets all of these features automatically. So the real question is, do they know that they have them? Making sure that teachers are doing a little overview with students so that they can help themselves on the assessment is very, very important.
Emily, we have a question in the Q&A on where is the dictionary tool found, and maybe you'll get to that in the next slide. So do you want to hold on to that or answer it now?
Yeah, I think it's on the very next slide.
Okay.
If not, it's on one of the next two. So great question.
Yeah, and before we transition, notice in the bottom left of the presentation, when you receive this, the link to the slides with the recording tomorrow, you're going to have access to online help. We recently released some articles specifically for a student audience. These are written at an upper elementary level, so they're great to put in front of your students. So as you're exposing them to these tools, maybe for the first time or maybe for a review of these tools, this will be a great article that you can share with them, maybe chunk it and break it up for them to help explore and learn how to use these tools. So it's not the only article for students, but it's specific to how to navigate the test and those tools that are available to them. So I just wanted to let you know what that was before we move forward.
Awesome. Those really help. So now we'll go a little bit layer deeper, and this does answer your dictionary question right here, but what supports are available at the test level? And what we mean by that is when you turn them on, when you are editing the test, then every student would get these. So if you're turning it on at the test level, yay, every kid who takes this test will get this as a support. Whereas the student specific supports would be something you would turn on and very independently by student. So for test level supports, we do have that calculator. We have several different variety of calculators that you can enable. We do have that lockdown browser tool. So again, if you want them to stay in the browser that they are in and not be opening additional browsers or applications, then lockdown browser is set at the test level. Spelling assistance. I have spoken about this one quite a bit lately. Spelling assistance is wonderful to turn on at the test level. We are going through some heavy transitions right now, and students are asked to write on assessments more than they ever have been. And so in order to get them into that niche, there's really no harm or foul in saying, hey, we're going to turn on spelling assistance for a while so you can double check your spelling. Eventually turning that off for the students who don't have it is completely reasonable, but knowing that spelling is an important part of taking an assessment, then that assistance can be there so that they're not missing questions for spelling. Question randomization. So every student is taking a different version of the test, ideally. And so the questions are randomized and the answer choices are randomized too. Then online dictionary, again, this is set at the test level because we're in a new world, again, of testing. And so you can turn on the online dictionary. The writing component is going across multiple subjects now. So turning on a dictionary is very reasonable to do for students to be able to utilize that tool. And last, we have the students being able to view their submitted responses. Definitely one of my favorites. And this has been enhanced most recently so that students can go see which answers they got incorrect. And it's during a time window that you select. So maybe it's after the testing window has closed. Then you say during this week, students can log back in and we can look at the questions that they missed. And using that notepad tool in conjunction, we could do some test remediation. So wonderful tools that you can use together as well. So those are set at the test level and would apply for every student. Whereas student-specific reports that we have on the right, text-to-speech, content clarification, Spanish calculator, spelling assistance, and excited to announce coming soon, speech to text, we'll be adding that. These are very specific to student needs. So you have students who do qualify for these needs, and they would need to have access to these tools on every assessment, depending on the content level. So these could be very customized at the student level in order to make sure that they have those supports. And so the variation there is you've had a meeting for this student and you know that they absolutely need this to be successful. Whereas on the test level, you're saying, let's take some time to practice utilizing some of these tools and we're all gonna get them. And so those would be the differences there. So I'll pause. I don't know if any questions came up for those, but those are getting a level deeper into the test and student supports.
We did have a question come in about anticipating a time frame for speech to text, and I think you'll speak about that at the very end of the presentation. And
Yes.
then one more, could you speak a little bit to who might need speech to text? How will this help our students?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. So we get confused when it's text to speech and then we're switching it and it's speech to text. So again, we have a lot more writing on assessments now. So our students that have difficulty typing, they need a tool that helps them speak to the computer and it types out what they are saying. So it helps them with that need so that, again, the majority of the test isn't spent typing, or they could just have an absolute need that typing is not realistic. And so speaking into the computer, then they will get a typed version of what they spoke. So for a constructed response question, this would be needed for specific students who qualify for this accommodation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks for those additional details.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll keep going. But like Tara said, we do have that support article on there if you want to go dig deeper into any one of those. Now we'll transition into how do we get these turned on? So this is a frequently asked question, and there are a couple of layers to turning these on. Not a lot of work, but it just depends on which route you would like to go. So test proctoring is we give autonomy to the teacher. So if they're getting in and they are about to give an assessment, they can say for this assessment on this day, I'm going to enable the student support. And so we can turn it, you can see in the video, they can turn it off, they can turn it on. That is at the test level. So that would probably be a circumstance where you're really kind of doing something outside of the norm, or there could have been communication that occurred and we didn't get that student support enabled, something to that regard, but probably not a practice a teacher would want to do for every single assessment. That would be pretty cumbersome to turn it on for every student, especially if I was a high school teacher, that would be quite a bit. So what would be a more reasonable solution is on the student profile, you can see that students have a view for their test and it shows you by content area what supports are enabled. So this allows you to know that for every English language arts assessment, text to speech and content clarifiers will be turned on for this student. And so you can just see as those go down, which assessments they would be turned on. So any category that matches for a subject area, the support is automatically enabled for that student. And those are very specific. And so not every single teacher can go in and update that. There has to be an additional access piece, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then the final piece is if that's absolutely not reasonable, larger school district, then you would probably want to import a file that aligns for students and their support. So 2 ways that you can do this. If you use TestHound, we are partners with TestHound, and they have an exact export in their system that you can take and then import into Aware. And that would cover your student supports for tested content areas. Since TestHound is focused on those tested grade levels and subjects, that would align to those and those specifically. So a lot of districts still use a custom import because they also, even if social studies isn't assessed in 5th grade, but we're taking assessments for social studies, we may want to make sure that student supports are enabled for those subject areas as well as a best practice. So you can do that in a custom import, and it would turn those supports on for those students for additional subject areas that are non-tested.
So we have a question related to that, Emily. Can TestHound be imported by campus? Does the campus have control over that level of an import?
That is a district level piece. So again, it's going to be tied to rights within the system. And there is a right that if you're able to manage those student supports, then you would also be able to manage an import as well. So that would be very much a right specific thing.
Thank you for that clarification. And to make sure that I shared accurate information, we had a question about the Spanish dictionary. Can you tell us what dictionary is used for Spanish and English?
Yes, we use Oxford for both Spanish and English.
Okay. For anyone wanting to know more, there was a question in the Q&A related to that, and the online help article was linked in the response. So if you want to explore the dictionary a little bit deeper, that has been linked in the Q&A. We have one more question in the Q&A, but I'm going to hold on to it until our next section.
Wonderful. These are great questions. You'll keep asking. Okay, so now we want to hear from y'all. We've showed you a couple of levels of student supports and tools. So how does your district let your students know what supports they have available? So how do you go about doing this? Do you do a practice type assessment and walk them through what supports and tools they have? Do you do a general student overview, maybe in a classroom, or are you kind of on the route of you're learning? We're all learning, right? So we're hoping that they find them, but now that we know, we may start developing a process. So you kind of let us know, how do you make sure students know what tools are there and how to help them help themselves?
I'm seeing a lot of A's roll in. I would love if anyone that gives their students some practice assessments, if maybe you could speak to what that looks like, how you structure it. So any details that you might be able to share through the chat that might help another campus or district replicate that practice would be lovely. So if you're an A, let us know some details about what that looks like.
Yes, that would be great. We have heard from some districts that they give a very informal assessment in the beginning and they walk students through each one of these tools. And there could be a variety of ways that you're doing this, but it's always great to have that on your list of things to think about.
Looks like we have a pretty good spread of responses here. Lots of A and B. I know for a while I was a 504 campus coordinator, and some of my best meetings that I got to hold were when the students were present and they could advocate for themselves. And it was so it just filled my teacher heart to hear students say, you know, like, my teacher lets me do that, but it really doesn't help me. I don't think I need that anymore. Or when they would say, I tried this really helps. Can I try doing it more often? So it's wonderful when as early as the conversation that we're having about what we think could support them, if they're present and able to provide us that insight. So want to celebrate any districts that are including students in those meetings as is appropriate for them developmentally.
Got to give a quick shout out to Trina Matthew, keeping it real, saying they do them all. I hope students find them, because it doesn't matter how often you practice and how often you show them, they'll forget, and hopefully they find them again.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's the truth.
Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about some processes that might exist within your campus or district, depending on your size, where that local control might come in and how you're organizing this information remaining up to date. So the first thing we want to talk about is scheduling your import. So this is something that's of high importance. You want to make sure that you're serving your students equitably and you are keeping these up to date as decisions are being made throughout the school year. So this is an opportunity for you to mark your calendar and utilize that local assessment calendar that you have that's nice and transparent. Everyone knows when we're giving that 5th grade science test. So we can also make sure that we're importing close to that date so that our supports are up to date for that student that's testing. We want to take into consideration that all throughout the year, we have conversations and we're making decisions about accommodations for students. So that's happening in our ARD meetings, our 504 meetings. That's sometimes happening with LPAC committee decisions that are being made, and potentially RTI. So there's lots of meeting spaces where decisions are being made of what will benefit this student at this point in time, and that needs to go into practice. So we'll talk about rights in a moment that will help you make sure that as that decision is being made, it's documented and reflected and aware, and not just on that piece of paper that you print out and hand to each of your teachers, but it's somewhere actionable that they can start utilizing with their students. So making sure you think through, when are those meetings happening? And should that be a process step at the end of that meeting, as that coordinator or director is updating documentation, making sure that they have access to do that and aware, so teachers can use that with their students immediately in the test environment. And then a reminder that if you are using the test count import, which we just clarified is for a district level import, this is only providing information for those tested subject areas. So if, like Emily shared before, you want your 6th grade social studies students to also have those supports in place, you'll need a process outside of the test count import to make sure that you're recognizing that support at multiple content areas and grade levels. So these are just some things to keep in mind. And then Emily, the question we had, and I'd love for you to chime in here, that we were going to bring back up, is for a test that is actively being taken now. Can I go to the student profile to turn on supports, or does that need to go through the test proctoring screen only? So can you provide a little bit of detail here for us?
Sure. Kara, I'm really glad that you asked this question, actually, because this comes up quite a bit. So to answer your question very specifically is, once the test is active, the only way to turn on a student support, pretending that it's not enabled, it wasn't enabled at the time on the student profile, is for the teacher to do that in test proctoring. And that was one of the things I was leaning into earlier. You know, test proctoring may be that fail safe of, oh goodness, I know the student needs this support and it didn't get enabled for whatever reason. And so making sure that teacher turns it on in test proctoring. So taking that back one more step, this is one piece that I have districts ask me quite a bit when I go out to districts, is they say, our student supports weren't quite right. They didn't show up the right way on the assessment. And so I immediately ask them, when did you make the test active? And a lot of times, my previous district did this as well. As soon as that test was ready, we marked it active. Like, we weren't going to edit it anymore, and we marked it active, and that could be a whole month in advance. And so we want to make sure that that's not part of your practice, actually. As much as it feels good to make that test active, the moment that you do, it grabs the current student supports at that time. And so if you have updated it since then, those student supports would not be accurate for a test. So as a great practice, you would want to make a test active really right before that testing administration begins. And so, yes, and Kara, you're kind of asking, so as a follow-up, when would you want to import work at that time? So you really want to make sure you have this calendar of here's when we're giving a district assessment. And so with the district that I work very closely with, they make sure that a week in advance that their student supports are imported and they're accurate. They double check to make sure that nothing has been updated since then. And then they make the testing window active the night before the testing window so that it grabs the most accurate student supports. And so they do have windows of time when they're double and triple checking these things to make sure that they are accurate. Because again, once that test is marked active, it grabs all of those active records for students right then. Keeping in mind, you can always put it back into pending and make it active again, and it's going to re-grab that information. But that would be something to keep in mind is when are we marking it active so that our students are getting the most accurate reflections of the supports that they should have. So hopefully that answered it. No, that was a long answer.
Yeah, I think that answered it very beautifully. I'm just going to recap some of the things that Emily said. When you mark your test active, the test is collecting your student supports that are stored at that point in time. If you're in a case where you have an active test that you're not ready to administer, go ahead and move it back to pending so that you can continue to update your student support. For a test that is already active, a teacher may, through test proctoring, update a student support. So this might be an edge case where occasionally that might need to happen. And then if you are still updating at that student profile, that is still being stored for the student. It's just not being applied to an active test. So if you're not concerned about the day the decision is made, maybe there's just some overlap, the test is active, you can still update that in the student profile and it will apply to future assessments for that student that were not marked active at that time. So I just wanted to summarize a little bit of what Emily said, and please, if you have additional questions, continue to put them in the Q&A so we can address them with you. So Emily, we've got a very specific question in the chat. Can you speak to that? If the test is active and online proctoring is enabled or an answer document printed, do you have to clear the answer docs for supports to update as well?
Yes, that's a good question. Kathy, I know you're 5 steps ahead. That is where you're going to have to weigh out a decision here. Kathy really asked a critical question. So this is one where you do have to decide. If we went ahead and marked the test as active and kids started taking it, we may not want to clear answer documents, right? That would be scary because we are clearing results from students. But if you know that you just got excited, marked it as active, and you need to put it back into pending, although things have been printed, but no one has taken the assessment, then absolutely, you could put it back into pending and make it active. I just really want to stress, make sure that no kids started taking the test, because if you do clear the results, then you did in fact clear out some answer documents for some students. So yes, that could be part of that process if you identify that.
Thanks for continuing to ask those questions so we can provide as much clarity as possible. So again, we're talking about some process steps right now for managing your support. So as you're looking at either creating a new local process or revising the local process you have in place, because as you learn more information, that's always a great opportunity to go back, review what you have in place. Is this still meeting our needs? Is there something we weren't taking into consideration? So think through who can manage supports either at the district or campus level. Who are we allowing to make these changes on a routine basis? When will they manage the support? So is this something that becomes a step for each of those ARD or 504 meetings that take place, or is there an interval where it's being updated? And then how will those documented changes be communicated out to your teachers and staff? So just making sure that you have that communication in place as those changes are made for each of your students. I want to talk a little bit about sharing the workload. So through management, you have the opportunity to turn on managed student supports. This is a right that can be turned on. And if you'll notice the legend here, either individuals will have no access to do this. They can have access at some campuses, which you would use that plus sign to designate which campuses they are able to practice this right at, or they could have access at all campuses. So making this a district level right that someone might have. So thinking of your district setup, you'll be able to decide what's the best case for you. If you have campus coordinators that manage this, access at those campuses they serve might be the best option for them. If you're a smaller district and you have one person or maybe principals that are present at all of the meetings where these decisions are being made, access at all campuses might be appropriate in those cases. So really think of who is best suited for your structure and the way your meetings and decisions are made to turn on this right. And then think through, how are you going to keep staff updated? How are you going to let them know when to check, how to check that student profile to make sure that it is up to date for their students? And even through proctoring, how can a teacher verify that the right supports are there? Something that I've witnessed in meetings is, hey, we're not quite ready to document this as a support, but we want to see if the support does help the student. So the teacher is always highly qualified to make the decision of what supports a student might need, which is why that proctor access to update supports is available. So if we're exploring, does the student need text to speech? Is this helping them, or is this something that will become a distraction? Let's test this out on the next 2 science and reading assessments by turning it on through the proctor setting. Then we can turn it on for just those assessments as we're ready to administer them and see how that impacts our students' data. So allowing teachers the knowledge and know-how to be able to do that can be super helpful and inform those meetings where you're making those big decisions for students. So I noticed a couple questions came and went in the Q&A. Anything we need to speak to with the whole audience?
No, they were more specific to if teachers can see the student profile, just to see which supports are enabled for every student across the subject areas. And yes, every teacher can see that when they search by a student. They just, again, can't necessarily edit it unless you have given them those rights. So
correct. So for a teacher that does not have this right turned on, that area will be grayed out. They'll see the gray check marks and know what is stored for their students. For an individual that has this right turned on, those will look like active links. The check marks will be blue and they'll have a button that says update so that they can make changes and save those changes by selecting update. So that will be the difference that you'll see between someone without this right of managed student supports turned on and somebody with this right turned on from that space. And Emily, do we have a report that teachers could run so that they could see all of their student supports without individually going to the student profiles?
yes, we do. We will talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, awesome. So here's our next opportunity to hop in that chat and tell us how things look at your district. So does your district have processes for keeping student supports updated? A, we sure do. B, we are working on it. Or C, not yet. Seeing lots of A's, some honest B's. We're working on what this looks like for us and making some changes as we learn how to best communicate and manage these changes. It is a lot of moving parts when we're talking about student support. So it's very understandable that there needs to be some changes and review of current processes that might be in place as we move forward. And more honesty in that chat and transparency. When you're new to a district, there's so much to uncover. Hopefully this helps you ask some questions that will get you some good discovery as to what is in existence at your district trainer. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I like it. When you're new and you just don't know, you needed another option, not saying, nope, I don't know yet. It's very valid. Okay, we're going to talk about data analysis. And so this is usually something that a lot of districts haven't gotten there yet. But as I'm working with districts, I like to make sure that they understand what they have available, and then they understand how to verify things and make sure that we're not turning on these features in vain. We're turning them on and they're being utilized, and or we're making sure we have a sidebar conversation about utilization. We're validating the need for a student support concern. So all of those things can really be answered with some good old data analysis. And so I want to walk through what we have available and what is actually coming very soon. So first thing is on the left side, it says include local student supports. And then you can see a little folder that, if you're familiar with our data analysis and creating a data view, that folder is located there. And when you are looking in local online supports, you're going to see all of those very customized supports based on the student need. So right now you can drag each one of those into a data view for an assessment, and you can see, yes, this support was enabled, or no, this support wasn't. Again, this is great because we just said there are a couple of tiers in that process. Maybe a teacher did override a student support. And so we could see that by pulling these over with our yes and no. And again, knowing, was it enabled? Was it not? Did we not get our import working? Did we not get that profile selected? All of this is a process, and we're all humans. So that helps us to know if it was actually turned on and the students could see it to click on it when the test was available. So under that folder on the left is, again, just letting you know if it was enabled at the test level. Then as we kind of move over to the right above that is a folder that says online administration. And so this folder will be ever growing, and it's going to have information that really pertains to that online administration specifically. So the first two you can see, you can look at elapsed time and active time for a student. So how long were they on the test actively working? And then what was the overall elapsed time total that they spent on the assessment? And then beneath that, you see a very powerful one that it has the number 42 by it in the icon, which means you're going to get a number next to it. The other ones above are going to be text, and then content clarification usage will be a number. So you can see in the screenshot right below that, if content clarifiers were enabled, I see my yes next to a kid's name, and then the student used those content clarifiers 2 times within the assessment. So I can see that they did actually click on them. It was enabled and they clicked on them. Okay, so then I have 2 insights for that student support. So the very exciting part about this is, well, actually I'll pause. That's on the next slide. If you need support building these data views and you need guidance for getting there, Tara added that link at the bottom for our online help guide. If you want to start pulling some of these data pieces and seeing them, you can absolutely do that. But we like to make sure what you have available right now. And on the next slide, I'll talk about what's coming soon. So if you notice, there are some usage ones that are missing as of right now to date. We are missing text to speech, the calculator, and spelling assistance specifically. Those would be ones that we would definitely want to see if the students use them. And so we have engineers that are actually working on getting these usage data fields added right now as we speak. So that's pretty exciting. So when you come back in here very, very soon, you'll be able to see text to speech and its usage. And that would indicate how many times did the student click on that text to speech icon and use it. So how many times did they click on it and actually listen to those questions out loud? The calculator support, again, how many times did they click on the actual calculator to use it? And then finally, spelling assistance, the number there will represent if they actually took the time to right click for spelling assistance and find the accurate spelling. So you'll be able to see in number how many total times these features were used on an assessment for a student that had them enabled. So that was a lot. I'm going to pause, see if there are any questions about this.
I love that this is coming, and it makes me think of all those times I wrote feedback for my students and then I found those papers in the trash can by the end of class. I had no way of knowing if they were using the feedback if I didn't structure something a way for them to use it. So I love that there's this transparency in the data to see, did a student actually use that text to speech and how much did they use it? So that's super going to be super helpful as we continue to enhance this area. We have a question in the Q&A, missed where those reports were located. So there is a link to the online help. These are custom, so you'll pull in the fields that you're wanting to see. Another way that I use these is, occasionally you get that contact from home. Hey, my student said they didn't get text to speech on this assessment, and I know that's one of their accommodations. This is a great way for you to go and check and make sure that it was turned on and provide that evidence. Now it's not just your word against the student's word, it's we have evidence that this was turned on in the program for them. So another great tool to take into your meetings and verify that student supports are made available to them, and coming soon, how much are they actually using it when it is available to them?
Yes, thank you for saying that, Tara. That is awesome. So excited to have those available. So, and by very soon, we do mean very soon. So be looking like next week, checking in on those and see when they're available. I don't think we had any other questions. I think we can move in and get feedback from y'all. So kind of based on what we heard, do you run these data analysis reports? And some of you had questions about how to do that, but do you run them, or hey, is that going to be something you start looking into? So your options are, yep, we're already on it. We sure do that. We're working on it, or again, not yet, but maybe you're excited about it. Maybe option D is excited looking into this. Because definitely with the usage, that makes it a lot more valuable. So, and definitely worth your time. So yeah, we have a lot of C's.
Yeah, and I love, some of us already have a quick view set up for this. So a teacher or a campus leader at that district level could apply this to any assessment that's administered online. So I love to see that practice in place. Thanks for sharing, Brandy.
Yes, wonderful. So if not, you know that it's there now, and you have a cool little guide, or you'll be getting an email tomorrow to walk you through how to do that. So we are so excited to provide that for you to help you make those in-time decisions on, do we continue to give this support to students, or is this something they're not utilizing? But showing that evidence of utilization is going to be big for validating them getting that accommodation on the STAR assessment. So love that. I am going to toss it over to Jeremy. We are so excited to have Jeremy talk about Aware Beta and just our new navigation with Aware. I got to tell you, I've been to a couple of districts in the past week. I've been to about 3 or 4, and I'm sure to stop and show Aware Beta. And an exciting story on my behalf is I started to tell teachers about change that was coming, and you probably know what their face started to look like. I started to see a lot of frown faces. And then when I walked through and show them Beta, I had 2 standing ovations at 2 different districts where teachers stood up and clapped because they were so excited about Aware Beta. So we want to give you a quick commercial and make sure you're not missing out on that opportunity. Hey, to get a standing ovation, right? That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, and no pressure. Hopefully I get a standing ovation here, perhaps in the form of emojis or something in the chat, so we can have similar experiences. So yeah, like Emily said, Aware Beta is coming. It's a thing, and Aware Beta is going to be the new experience that users are going to have as soon as we finish completing all of the connections from Aware Classic into Aware Beta. And as we were starting to build Aware Beta, we really had one main mission, and that was to enhance the user experience by streamlining and simplifying how you access all of your things. So I'm going to show you a very explicit kind of example here in just a minute about how Aware Beta can really save you time. I know a lot of people potentially haven't even tried to look at beta yet, just because who has the time to explore something like that with the school year kind of being like it is, or with everything that I have to do on my to-do list. And so I want to show and highlight some of the ways that beta could potentially help you out. And then just a couple other notes on this slide. We're going to continue to develop and add things to Aware Beta throughout the school year. So you'll notice on my little preview here, I've got a screen grab of the Aware Beta navigation, and some of the things are still marked with coming soon, while others are not marked with coming soon. And so we're continuing to make all those connections throughout the school year. We anticipate to have all of our connections complete by summer 23. We're actually aiming to get them finished before summer 23. And so Aware Classic will be going away this coming summer. And so now's a good time for you to dive in and start exploring and start getting used to the new way that things are being used and the new ways that you can access material and content in Aware. So let's start by looking at some of the component pieces. The first piece I want to highlight is the overview. The overview is your landing page. And when you click on Aware Beta, you're going to basically have a new set of opportunities. And I'm going to go over to a live demo site here. And so when I go, let's say we started here in Aware Classic, this should be very familiar to all of us. Right here at the very tippy top, we've got this Try Aware Beta button. You may have seen that highlighted recently when you logged in. If you haven't clicked it yet, I highly encourage you to go ahead and click it, and it loads the new interface. And right off the bat, within your overview, you have, we're calling these cards. You have an analysis card and an assessment card, where it's actually populating the 5 most recent tests that were completed and the 5 most recent assessments that you actually went in and actively edited. For a time saver, this is huge because the 5 most recently assessed test items, you can just click that and go straight to the analysis and get started. Additionally, with the assessment, you can actually create a new assessment from the fly just by clicking new assessment and going straight to which type of assessment you want to create without having to go into author off to the side and do a few extra clicks. So let's demo this just for a second. Let's say I wanted to look at STA Science Demo. If I'm back in Classic, to get to STA Science Demo, I have to make, and y'all can count with me, of course, your mics aren't on, so I can't hear you count, but I have to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I went to the wrong content science. 5, 6, 7 times in order to get that data view. Whereas if I go back to beta, as long as that test was completed just recently, that STA demo is right there. 1 click, exact same data. There it is, ready to go. That saves you quite a bit of time, where it feels like I'm fumbling with my keys in a scary movie, you know, going through all those clicking trees. Another thing that we can highlight is if
I'm going to clap for you though real quick. Woo!
Not fumbling for my keys with the axe murderer behind me. If I want to go and access an assessment, similarly, and this is for a teacher, not even for an admin. Admin would have a few extra clicks. I have to go to My Teacher Test. I'm going to go to a pending assessment. So that's 2, 6th grade 7, math 8, and then I'm going to look at this test. Sorry, miscounted my clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks. And then here's the assessment I want to play with. But if I edited that assessment recently, back in beta, it's in my overview right there. That's the test I just edited. 1 click, boom, there it is. I can access it right away. I don't have to go through the trees. I don't have to click a million things to get back to what I was just recently working on. But let's say it's not on the cards. How do I get to some of those other things if they're not on the overview cards? Well, let's start with data views. I've got an active GIF in the slideshow here, but data views has a new way of interacting with a data table rather than with all the click down trees. And you can usually find what you're looking for far faster than you could have with the click downs. And so if I'm looking at, again, let's go to data views. If I'm looking for the STI Science demo, it does happen to be right here, but I can do a years click down right off the bat instead of having to click down a couple of different times to get to years. And if I'm looking for this year, hit apply, boom, I'm only limited to the tests for this year. And then if I want to limit it to a specific grade level, 8th grade, boom, there it is. And I'm already starting to really narrow it down. And it's a lot simpler to use these filters up here at the top, and then boom, hit my test or hit my analysis scores. And then usually you don't get an option. You load student scores right off the bat, and then you have to change your quick view template. You get the option of choosing your template before you load, and I hit continue, and bam, there's my data that I'm looking for. So again, it's saving time, it's saving clicks, it's making life just a little bit easier. Okay, so there's data views. Oh, I forgot to highlight too. If I go back to data views, if I know what I'm looking for, I can just filter it by title. This you can do in Classic, but boom, type in some things, load it. There's my data.
Yeah, Jeremy, I often joke with teachers now when I show them, I say, you don't have to remember the name of your test. Can you believe it? It's going to be the most recent one there. And they're like, what? I don't have to remember my multiple long name of my assessment. You don't have to remember it anymore. It'll be right there.
And if you're a district, like a lot of districts we work with do, you have naming conventions, and you include a whole lot of things in your title that make it sometimes difficult to fish through the name of your assessment. And so, yeah, just like Emily said, that's going to make that access quite a bit more efficient. Now, one more thing to highlight, the data views table, if you click up here in this clicking tree, this tree right here at the top will take you right back to where you were, and it saves the things you were filtering and looking for. And so if I had a year set and I had a subject and grade level set, it holds on to that. And so I know I need to look at these three. So I'm going to click on that one. I'm going to load it. But then if I go back, those three are still right there. And those filters will not go away until you either reset or leave the page and come back to the page or refresh the page. So that's a handy little thing as well. If you are a district or teacher user, right here at the top, you can configure your data view and right off the bat, click a particular class period or click a monitor list and view this data by a saved monitor list or all of my students. That looks a little bit different for admin, and all those admin drop downs will be held up there as well. All right, let's keep going. Let's say I want to access an assessment. The assessment table works very similar to the data view table. You go click on author on the left-hand side, and then you can create a new assessment with a couple of clicks. You can proctor an assessment either as a teacher, as an admin, or you can find a test with easy to use filters. And so to show you that, I'll start with administer. As a teacher, you used to click up here in Classic, you had that button up the top, test available. Now I go to administer, boom, it just loads that right away. I can find the test I need, turn it on for online proctoring, go to online proctoring, it works just like usual. District admin, it looks a little bit different when you go to administer. If you have access to multiple campuses, you'll filter to a campus, then find the teacher you need, and then it'll load this user interface that you can proctor the assessment for the teacher if they're absent or something along those lines. And then if I want to author, this table is pretty similar to the data view table, but I can access all of my standard assessments, my rubric assessments. Coming relatively soon, we're going to have student inventories loaded right next to the rubric as well. And so I can use my filters, boom, apply, go access any test I need based on the filters or by a search. And then there's the test. I can go ahead and start manipulating that test. I want to point this out because this has been a question we get from time to time. For optimization's sake, we find that users don't often go into author a test to pull an old test. Only if they're ever copying an old test do they really look at an archive test. We do not load archive tests by default. And so if you want an archive test to appear in this table, just go to the status, click archived, hit apply, and they'll appear. I don't happen to have any archive tests that match this year, and so I would have to clear that, but that would load and give me my archive tests there. All right, next up, student forms. We just made the connection for student forms, and I'm going to go to a different user here. Student forms, you have to have the right in order to access student forms, but if I go to student forms, the click down trees are gone, and I can start by either choosing a district or school form at the top, and then I can filter by categories, or I can just go ahead and type the name of the form that I'm looking for. Subforms are really clear and obvious now. Whereas before it wasn't as obvious which ones were main forms and which ones were subforms. So now they're all right here, and then I can click the form and I load the user interface that we're used to dealing with. And of course, this always happens when you're demoing. There it goes. And I can go check the log and see, you know, all the activity on those forms. And again, you go back, click forms at the top, you can go back to your search and keep going from there. And all of the forms load right off the bat without having to do any of the drop downs, but you can filter, search, do whatever you need to access the forms there. And that's it for me. Keep an eye on what's coming up in beta. These connections are going to be continuously coming throughout the remainder of this school year. And so as changes are made, you'll probably get some user pilot notifications. Hey, go check out the new things we connected. You'll notice that come hopefully about early March, we'll have 90 to 100% of all of our connections made. And that will be the real time. If you're a power user and doing a whole lot of things with settings, that will be the time for you to really start diving in before Aware Classic goes away. So there's the new hotness.
Hey, thank you for our commercial. If you liked getting to see Aware Beta and you're excited, give us some applause, some claps. Like I said, it's very, very exciting. Clicking 17 times is no longer a thing. So that's pretty darn exciting. And like I said, I just really encourage every district I go out to make sure your teachers are clicking there. Nobody likes to log in one day and the screen looks very different. So make sure that they know what's coming and that they don't get scared. So change can be scary. Last thing is we wrap up our webinar today. Hopefully you got some helpful information. I always like to tell you what is next, what's coming, what can you expect. I already did a little drop of a feature and told you that pretty soon those usage fields will be available. You know, I kind of gave you an elbow hint that you could go start looking sometime next week to find those. So that is very exciting. But on top of that, we also spoke to speech to text. So again, I know you want an exact window for this one, but you can definitely know that by your December administrations, that speech to text should definitely be available. So if you're giving those midterm type assessments in December, this will be available. It's highly likely it'll be available before then, but we get a little nervous with software and we don't want to overpromise things. So coming very soon. What I like to say about this one is it's one that I do think we have thought through very well. We have looked and done our research. It is a very new element, even in software. And so what we are adding is the ability for our interface to recognize speech to text, even within a lockdown browser. So pause for excitement there. Ours will work with lockdown browser being enabled. Or I have reached out and spoken to a lot of districts that you've purchased something. You have purchased a speech to text tool and maybe you like it. Maybe it goes in Google. Maybe you have purchased a third-party one and your kids are used to it and you like it. That's amazing. I completely understand. And so with speech to text being turned on for a student, we will remove that copy and paste functionality not being allowed for students within a constructed response, so that you could also use a third-party tool and a student could copy from that third-party tool and paste it into our constructed response. So we're really trying to go a step above and say, if you have a tool you like, we love that. Use the tool you love. If you want to use ours, amazing. We're going to create our own as well. So hopefully that's exciting. And you're looking forward to checking that out. In addition, some other little wins that we are working on right now. Our hotspot question type will very soon limit student answer choices. So pause for excitement there. If you say that there are 2 correct answers, a student can only put 2 correct answers. Yay. That has been needed. And we know that multi-select also needs the same option as well. So we are working on these things, but hotspot you will see sooner rather than later. We also are finishing up right now working on our character count. Ours didn't mimic the states and they had made some changes. So our character count will remove spaces. It will no longer count spaces and it will more accurately reflect the state's character count for constructed response and do just words And then it will also do punctuation. So we have that coming out very soon and in its final stages as well. So hopefully you are excited about all these new changes. We love hearing from you. Please send us feedback. Thank you for being awesome today. And again, training and at eduphoria.net is a great place if you need some additional support in any of these features. Anything that I missed, Tara?
We've got just a couple more slides for upcoming events. So as part of our continued webinar series, we do have 2 other webinars coming up this month. So on the 19th, we will have our Strive team talking about measuring growth for not only our students, but also our educators, and looking at that really rich data that you get in Strive that can help you make those correlations. And at the end of the month, we'll all be doing an Ask Me Anything student monitoring edition. So please come, submit your questions. What do you want to know about student monitoring? We'll have a panel of Eduphoreans available to answer those questions live for you. We are also working on a mini series to continue peeling back the layers of Aware Beta, so that communication and opportunity to sign up for those events will be communicated soon. And if you like what you're seeing in Aware Beta, we had a question in the chat about, hey, I see on Jeremy's screen this single test. I don't see that in my platform. It's not missing. It's not available yet. We are going to be having shortly after TAC, the Texas Assessment Conference, a preview of that feature and more to come in the future. So if you saw that piqued your interest, Aware Beta is feeling nice and comfortable for you, and you want to continue exploring in that split space, we invite you to join our launch party for Aware Premium, so you can see additional data analysis tools that will be available in the coming months to year. So we're very excited to share that with you and get that into more educators' hands. As we wrap up, we always like to extend to our other applications. So we primarily spoke about Aware today. Other things you can do on this topic in Strive, have some professional learning opportunities for your teachers to learn how to use these supports that we've been talking about and how to monitor them. If you've created a wonderful new data view, how do they use that data view to understand how students are using these supports? In Forethought, teachers can use the ELPs in their lesson planning, and that can help them make sure that they are giving the right tools and supports to those students that need that, or any student for that matter. And then Inform Space, if you are engaged in hearing from your students and you know they're empowered and can speak to those supports, get some feedback from them on how that's going and the insights that they're able to provide you. So thanks so much for hanging on to the end with us. We appreciate, as always, your engagement and liveliness in our chat and Q&A. And we look forward to meeting with you again in the future. Thank you.